maybe not as a member of the team itself, but as part of the evaluation group. Who are our constituencies? Who determines what a good law school is, and therefore how does that determine what constitutes the team? So that's some of the who questions that I was asking. I had some what questions too. I'm looking at the criteria and they're wonderful and they're very, very detailed, but I'm asking myself and perhaps throwing out to you, sort of like that student who is underdressed and unprepared and then realizes the best defense is a good offense and throws questions at the prof, hoping that the prof will answer the question, right? So, in terms of what we're measuring, are we measuring inputs or are we measuring outputs? And I think this is a very difficult question, and I'm not sure that there is any answer to it, right? Because I look at even the questionnaire that's been set up, and sort of our curriculum, our pedagogies, our libraries, etc. Most of it is sort of from the perspective of the institution and the teachers. I understand that some accreditation processes try to measure output in terms of the actual performance of the students. I know that there are difficulties with that, and that results in its own biases. But I think maybe this is something to think about and discuss just a little bit, perhaps later on in our sessions. And also, is there a way to measure not just an absolute output, but how much value add a school has given to the students? Are these the sorts of criteria and measures that we should be looking at? That's sort of the what. And finally, I suppose the why. And in the why, I'm glad to see that added prestige is the third and the last why, because as someone who's more interested in pedagogy than in looks, obviously, it seems to me that while that's a nice to have, that should not be that important. I note the second why, which is perhaps that we use this as a tool for engaging with our handlers and our masters, and I think in that sense it's a wonderful effort and it's a useful effort. But I suspect that the real value is, of course, the first one, right, which is where we learn from each other and we help each other to improve. And I think the one thing we want to perhaps just make sure that we don't get distracted by in this whole process is how to engage with that. It seems to me that's really the final outcome, and I wonder if the modality of having, so how do we take what becomes very much a institution-specific process, perhaps, and feed that back into what we're doing here, right? There's the confidentiality aspect, and to some extent it seems to me those might stand in the way of the larger good, which is where we actually learn from this process, and it might be something, again, for us to think about. So I realize that I have been irritating to you as I am to all my students, because I'm always asking these questions, and at least in school, I actually do know some of the answers to the questions. Actually, I have no idea at all. I will say that in US law, as Simon has said, and whatever Simon says, let's go. You know the old game. We're very happy to be collaborators here. We think that the certification program is ambitious in its scope, and that it sounds like so much thought has gone into it, and we're very happy to be part of it. As we move on to fleshing out its details, we will no doubt encounter some devils and some devilish questions, and I look forward to participating in the ongoing conversation to resolve some of those. Thank you very much.
Okay, we do have some time for some questions, I think, or comments, whatever you would like. And I must say, for somebody who knew nothing, you posed some rather important questions for us to have to deal with. So we definitely want you to come back and continue to pose questions. So does anybody want to say something? Ask something? Yes. Do you have microphones you're going to...
Must I yell?
I bet you can.
Is there a microphone to take back to them?
Thank you very much for the presentations. George Mbedi from the University of Johannesburg. I just want to make a comment based on our experience. We had, but this was initiated by the university just to gauge how international various schools are within the university. And an international panel came and we had a huge debate that, okay, we've got reviewers who are highly regarded from Cambridge and everywhere, but they don't know the local context. And we argued at length until we won, where we got one of the board members, Professor Ubeng Mirek, who's not here, not coming from the same school, but somebody who knows the sector, how it works in South Africa. And at the end in their report, the panel said, we were grateful to have a local person who understands the context, because there were things that to us seem strange, but while here is common. So I would say it's really important, but not from the same school, but within the country, so that there are no, it's just not a waste of time, because later on this is how it is, or there might be reasons for doing things in a particular way. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will say one of the differences from of this proposed certification program from what an accreditation program is like is Penny was describing, you know, we want to know about faculty and their credentials, and we want to know this, that, and the other. We're not going to be, in an accreditation program, there are standards about what the quality, the number of your faculty, things like that. We're not looking at that. We're trying to get a notion of what context. We're asking those questions. We're really to have a sense of what the challenges are any individual school faces. And we're not, we would never be saying, well, you need 12 more faculty. I mean, you know, we're trying to sense, given the challenges and given your goals that you tell us are your goals, you know, sort of, are there ways we can suggest that maybe would help you get to your goals? And the idea of having somebody from the region who is not from that law school. I mean, the law school will be telling us what they think their things are, but having somebody else is a useful idea to further refine and understand, so that we don't make suggestions that make no sense, because they don't take account. Because again, it's not a cookie cutter. We're not expecting each school to look alike, or to be able to take on the same programs or the same opportunities or challenges.
Let me just add to that. I agree that local context is very important, and you had raised this about a local person. But I think the difficulty for IALS, and this is where the rubber meets the road, we have accreditation, we can call it, you can say it's supportive and so on, but at some point there's a yardstick, and I think that's what we need to determine. What is the yardstick? Because if just everybody, there's not a universal standard, then, you know, then this is not accreditation. But I think that's an important conversation.
My name is Maggie and I'm from South Africa, University of KwaZulu-Natal. I would like to say thank you very much to the three presenters, really good presentations. But I would like to echo the caution that Eleanor has mentioned about the purpose of this accreditation or certification programs. For me, what is critical is that if the purpose is focused on trying to establish best practices and guide and assist institutions that want to improve what they're doing or wish to have an outside perspective, and that's great. But if the purpose is linked to enhancing one's reputation and one's status, then I think I'd caution against that very, very seriously. Because as Penny's mentioned as well, we don't have a universal standard. So what may be of interest or particular focus or very socially relevant in a particular region may differ from the other regions. So as far as I'm concerned, there's potential then if you, for some kind of ranking system to develop. And that's already a controversial thing, and institutions regard rankings quite with some kind of caution as well. So I would be careful about that. The second aspect is the privacy aspect. And I think that there is a potential for institutions even though we feel that we collaborate a lot and that we like to see each other as brethren, but the point is that we are in competition and we are all going after the same students at some level, especially when you look at internationalization and how important that's become. So there's concerns about privacy as well. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that Professor Manigo Reddy has just stepped down as the president of the South African Law Deans Association, where she served with great distinction.
I have to say something. It is, okay. One size does not fit all. There's not going to be a yardstick that's going to be measured against, this is the same yardstick to measure everybody. Okay? That's the challenge, and that's why we're here. We have to look at the context. When you look at a country with per capita income is less than $1,000, you can't compare that with, just say, Singapore. You're about $60,000. The resources aren't there. But that's a nation state. They have an obligation. So how do you encourage that? We're not here to rank. We're not here to tell you top down, this is what you have to do. We're here as a community of law teachers to decide for ourselves what matters. Everything else is always imposed on us. But we haven't developed our own standards. Now, a lot of it makes sense. And we may be using some of those, but we have to make sure that it is within a certain context. We have to take that into consideration. And that's the most important thing. And so, Eleanor, you raised some really good questions. And that's basically the brief of the committee, to figure this stuff out, to make sure that we are addressing the differences, that we are addressing and we are responsive to everybody's needs. And it's not one size fits all at all.
I think people who are in the philosophy, the branch called epistemology, it is their problem. The problem is, what is our goal? Is it the goal that the legal education in the entire global phenomena shall try to empower the people, empower students? That's number one. Or alternatively, is it that we are accrediting? Actually, in a country like us, we debated this when Professor Menon sent me for exercising NAC, National Accreditation Council, and I had to then at that time prepare the validation process of Accreditation Council in a country where there are multicultural, because law is an instrument of culture, and therefore it takes a strong role in shaping the character of the population. Now today is in a fragmented society. Society is also fragmented, is not emancipated altogether, you know that. And all of you are aware that we are not in an even playing field. It is not an even playing field. It is an uneven playing field, and in this process, if we try to internationalize the standard, it can be market driven, seriously market driven, where market is still immature. Now therefore, one has to understand that if our program here is called a kind of empowerment process, that all law schools of the country, of all countries, shall be empowered, their teaching community shall be empowered, their students must be empowered. In fact, in the whole deliberations, I didn't find any place of the students. Whether your curriculum would be developed as per the instruction or per the aspiration of the people, of the students, I didn't see that. We have to see that perhaps. But as a first step that you are doing is phenomenal. I must say, your step is in the right direction, but there are a lot of challenges. And a lot of challenges will perhaps give you a kind of a striking power that this is our goal, we want to achieve that. If that is the purpose, we could have said that today. Perhaps I think that would be realistic. But I quite agree with him that in this process of unevenness in the whole world, you try to internationalize would be actually fragmentization. Thank you very much.
In India, I don't know about the accreditation and certification processes outside India, but India in certain law schools created under statutes, legislation passed by a state or the federal government, there are statutory requirements that every 5 years you have to get a high power empowered body to review the work and to suggest whether it is conforming to the objectives for which the institution is created. I'm just wanting to ask the question, when my institution was first reviewed under the order of a chancellor, he constituted a 3-member body, one drawn from Sri Lanka, one drawn from England, and one drawn from America. They came and stayed with us in the law school for about 14 days. And at the end of it, they have submitted a report which had helped us to understand both our strengths and weaknesses and address those issues. My question therefore to you is, the proposed project, will it be neither doing accreditation or certification, but doing a review in terms of a statutory objective for a particular law school?
I think as we are now thinking of it, and we're trying to evolve, which is why we're trying to talk to you, the notion is that it's doing a review, and that's the primary thing, and that's why we started out saying doing a review and to help you to assess against your goals, not against our goals, against your goals. You know, how are you doing in achieving your goals, and are there other things that maybe you could do to get you to your goals? The certification is, again, and we've talked a little bit about this, but it hasn't been decided, it's sort of an open question. The reason there's even it's not accreditation, it's certification. It's very different than accreditation, both because we are not judging and saying you passed, you failed. We're saying, you know, this, and we're doing it against your goals, and your goals as telling you how they fit within international standards that this group has kind of evolved into. So it's sort of that. I think that the reason we put in an element of certification is actually early on in the discussion with deans, some schools and some parts of the world wanted to have a certification program because they thought it would be very helpful for them dealing in particular with their governmental authorities or their universities to be certified by a global body. A lot of schools would find that unnecessary. And so we have talked about maybe we have one for those schools who feel it would be helpful, so that it's like a formal thing beyond the review for those schools who want it. But you could say, I'd like to be reviewed, I'd like to get advice. I don't want to go through, you know, having you then tell me am I certified or not. I'm just more interested in you doing what you described the team did that came to your school, and writing a report and telling us, giving us advice, acknowledging where we're at. And that's something we could do. Now, again, we're trying to leave this to be flexible so that we are responsive to what the school needs, given where they're at and where they're at both in time and in place. So the certification, for example, I would be dumbfounded if any United States school wanted to go through a certification process. Our accreditation process is so elaborate, they're not going to want to put another layer on it. So, you know, some jurisdictions and some schools are not going to be interested. But those who want it, there's no reason for us to not provide something and try to help those schools if they think it is. So that's the why it's sort of it's not an absolute one way or another right now.
But maybe we should vary with some
other. In fact, to add to this, we had a bill moved in Indian Parliament for purposes of certification and accreditation by professional bodies. You know, you have a list of professional bodies who have, either through an objective questionnaire or any other way, purely objective. And if they do something, some errors, the university will have a claim for damages against them. that sort of a legislation was proposed in Indian Parliament to enable universities to get a sort of ranking or whatever you may call it, so that it will be used in the market for attracting students, that you are #1 university for this particular study.
Well, again, because we're not trying to set up a ranking system at all, we're trying to stay as far away from a ranking system as we possibly can. We are not saying every IALS school has got to go through this, and then we'll give you the rank of every IALS school and how they fall into this. It's not. It's a purely selective. We're giving you advice so that to make it. If you get certified, does not mean it means you went through this process and you asked for it, and we decided you reached a certain level, that you've met the goals and the international standards. But we're not. I don't think we would conceive of ourselves as an outside body that did as you described. That's not what we're trying to attain, and perhaps we need to describe it differently. I'm not sure, and maybe there's other ways of describing it that would make that clearer, but that's not our goal.
Ma'am, just as rejoinder, the rejoinder is simple. I already said that there is unevenness in the education system. So ground level conditions are uneven. Now by giving a certification, are you creating more unevenness? Are you giving a signal that this institution is accredited, this institution has a certification, that institution doesn't have a certification? Are you doing that? That is the kind of. But if it is empowerment process, this question will not come.
I just wanted to add the review thing. Let me just give you an example about where an outside group, whether you call it review, whatever you call it. Let's assume, like George Williams raised the point about technology and teaching. If he comes to my school and he actually talks about use of technology, etc., for the faculty to hear it from an outsider is, I think, makes some difference. So it's support, it's review, and so on. And that's how I see it. It's the same when the Council of Higher Education reviewed us in Cape Town. If there are faculty members who are resistant to certain kind of change, to have outsiders talk about ways to be supportive, that's the review process. That's the kind of support I'm thinking of.
The IALS, perhaps this process has its worth as a consultative mechanism and as an assurance that you're on the right track. So isn't that what I mean? It may not perhaps rise to the levels of expectation in the context of the Republic here, but I think if